Here we have Max İgan on the Silver Antidote channel. This is my first interview that we'll be having on the channel, and he has a website called thecrowhouse.com, and everybody can obviously go over there and check out exactly what it is that he has and the extreme time and effort he has spent during his life in trying to educate and help people into understanding the world that we live in. So welcome to the channel, Max.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you for asking me on. It's an honour to be on for your first interview.
Thank you so much. So this is obviously the first interview, so guys, bear with me if things are a little bit sketchy, if there's breakouts in the communication. It's probably down to internet connections, being that we were both in fairly remote areas, so bear that in mind. So Max, the first question and area that I'd like to get into would be the shadow society and the darker side of existence that is generally hidden, but from time to time it creeps up into the headlines. Now obviously I'm from the UK, and from time to time there will be stories emerging from high society organisations and lords and ladies of the land being connected to various occultist rings and rituals. Now obviously you've covered this element quite a lot, so hopefully you can try and share a little more information regarding how these societies operate and what it is that they are creating within the shadows. Over to you, Max.
Well, like it's a topic that people don't really want to look into. I mean, it's kind of interesting for people. They find it kind of novel. You know, they see a story in the news about some prince or some royal or whatever who's involved in some scandal. They call it a scandal, of course. It's a crime. It's not a scandal. It's a crime. But they think, oh, that's all very dark, and you know, all these sort of interesting things, and they sort of hush up and they don't talk about it. But they don't realise how all pervasive this is, and how many people are involved in these circles and these dark things that go on. You know, if you can really try to understand society, that there's a group of people who are usually in positions of power, most of them in some position of power, that are all involved in what can only be described as dark satanic rituals. I mean, and I don't really do Satan, but I can't think of another word for it. But it's dark occultist rituals that go on behind the scenes. And these people are basically farming and harvesting the human race. They're harvesting us energetically, and they're also harvesting us physically by their use of children. There's rampant pedophilia that goes on behind the scenes, and it's a really difficult area for people to come to terms with, because it's so pervasive, and it's something that they don't really want to talk about. You know, sexual crimes and crimes against children and all this really dark, taboo, satanic stuff. It seems like something out of a Hollywood movie to a lot of people. It just doesn't seem that it's real. It doesn't seem like it could be going on in their area, but it is. There is a dark circle that is sitting behind this society, and that's who controls things. I mean, really, when you look at it, I mean, all the stuff that goes on in Parliament, why don't we see it all? Why is it all happening behind closed doors? What are these people really up to when they're in these buildings and all this sort of stuff? I mean, there's a lot of really dark stuff going on. There really is. And you look at the amount of child trafficking that goes on around this earth, and it's all very hushed up. But we hear little snippets of it. You'll hear a little news report about some, you know, child, a container full of children or whatever. You hear little snippets and news reports about certain scandals with certain people in high places. And you hear reports about, you know, children being smuggled, but you know, people kind of hush it up and hope it goes away. But really, it's a huge problem. There's at least 20,000 children a year that are being trafficked into Queensland, the state that I'm living in Australia here, and these are imported from overseas. And you've got to ask what's being trafficked out. And if that amount of children is being trafficked into one state in Australia, then how many children are being trafficked around the United States and around England and around Europe and around all these other countries? But essentially what we've got here is, like, if you can think of all the leaders, all the world leaders, a lot of people in positions of power, they're all involved in what can only be really seen as a cult or a dark religion, or it's hard to even give it a name, you know, but it's kind of a cult that exists in the shadows behind society, and it's these people who puppeteer society. You know, they keep us all busy running on the treadmill, collecting paper and collecting dollars and trying to collect stuff and trying to compete with each other to have a bigger front door. But behind all of that is this dark mechanism that is basically harvesting our energy and harvesting our children. I mean, why do we have to do all the things that we have to do in society? Why are we struggling so much? Why do we have to run on the treadmill so much? Who puts all these rules and laws in place? You know, it's all done to keep us distracted. So that's kind of what's going on. But it's something that people just don't want to look at, you know. It's really dark. It's something that is disturbing and something people don't want to admit. But it's also why it's so difficult to raise society and get the people to stand up against this system, because this pedophile network, this group of people who are up to all these dark, nefarious things, is so pervasive, and it exists in so many areas of our society, like right down to local councils and local schools and hospitals and legal systems, and you'd be surprised at the amount of people that are involved in this sort of stuff. And so you're never going to really get these people to stand up against the government, you know. And the only way to really combat it, as I was talking in that recent interview that I did, the only way to really combat all of this negative stuff is for those who are aware of it to acknowledge it and to always operate within their moral compass. That's really the only way to compete it. You know, you've got to be able to be aware that it's there, bring the information to other people, and when you see things that are going wrong, you need to be able to stand up and make a noise about it. Stop being cowed about all this sort of stuff. You know, humanity needs to wake up to itself and stop what's going on, because basically it's people farming. When you look at it, I mean, all of our countries, the way the societies, the way the people are all corralled and made to walk between the lines and do all these things and follow all these rules, and are always running on the treadmill and being taxed, and you know, all the fines and everything that they do to make sure that we're in scarcity all the time. This is people farming. And it's this distraction, this constant distraction that we've got from our work life and our social lives as well, and our need to measure ourselves by our stuff. So we need to collect stuff all the time so that we have worth, because we only feel like we have worth if we have stuff. You know, it's all of this sort of stuff that distracts us and keeps us running and keeps us from ever really looking at what it is that really controls us. You know, and through all the things we're facing, we're always constantly looking for leaders. We're looking for someone to come along with a new plan to lead us to safety. We're not really prepared to change what we do ourselves and realise that that's the plan. That's really the only path to safety. You know, humankind has to wake up to itself, and they've got to acknowledge the shadow that exists in this world, and they've got to stand up and face it. Otherwise, we're never going to get anywhere. There's not going to be any hope for freedom, no matter what plan anybody brings along and offers you, whatever system they want you to fall in line to. It's never really going to work until people have changed their moral compass and are prepared to do the right thing in all that they do. That's really the big problem that we're facing. It's our willingness to do the wrong thing, our willingness to tolerate the wrong thing, our willingness to look away when we see it, and you know, our unwillingness to face that which really controls us and to acknowledge this dark energy for what it is.
So we've got this dark underbelly running through society in all the higher areas of society. Now, what you're saying is that the majority of society effectively need to wake up, grow a pair of balls and a backbone to actually confront the situation that is occurring. But the problem that is faced with society is the trap that has been built upon and indoctrinated on for multi-decades, because obviously the whole schooling system has been orchestrated and designed in order to keep people enslaved into that system and forever trying to attain higher net worths and, as you say, a bigger front door, when in reality all of this means very little, because it's just a material asset thing, whereas the more important things is trying to create a balanced social life, a balanced social interaction with fellow human beings, and not to lead towards the darker side, which is money driven, success driven, which then ultimately leads you into these, what I believe are these Masonic groups, which may start off seemingly innocent at the entry levels, but the deeper and deeper you get into these groups, the more darker things you have to do in order to give the impression of growing in status and power within of that group. And obviously that's when these sort of satanic rituals and unhuman things you have to do to the fellow man become apparent. So what's your take on this farming of humanity? How do you see the farming occurring throughout the planet? How are we trapped inside of this system?
Well, we're trapped in it by our belief that it's real, by our belief in authority, by our willingness to comply and to tolerate the darkness that exists in the world. That's really what it is. I mean, the magic that holds us in place in this system, it is magic because it's simply words written on paper that we believe are real. And what are words? They're things that people spell out on paper. And what is spelling? It's a spell. It's casting spells. It's our belief in this stuff. It's a spell. None of this stuff is real. Just because somebody wrote something on a piece of paper and put a fancy letterhead on it doesn't mean you have to do that. Doesn't mean you have to let that spell control your life, because that's what it is. It's a spell. When you can really see how this works and how it's put in place through the written language and the written word, and you realise that you're just complying with what people write on paper, it's like we live in a paper-based reality. We're not paying attention to what's going on. See, it isn't just the fact that there are children who are harvested and used in rituals and all sorts of stuff like that as well. It's the energy harvesting that goes on by our belief in authority, by our belief that this whole system is real when it's not. It's just an idea. That itself is how the magic occurs. It's like when you put an electric fence around a cow or a bull, and it electrocutes itself once or twice, and after that you don't have to put any current through the fence. You can just put a piece of string up there, and the bull will stay within the enclosure because it's trained to believe that it's going to get hurt if it goes up to that fence. And that's kind of what we've got. We've got this indelible sense of authority installed into us through schooling and through the scholastic system. And even before that, our parents are training us to respect authority. So it's all about training us to respect authority and training us to walk between the lines. That's the spell. That's the magic. That's how the farming occurs, is just by us being afraid to be who and what we are, and being afraid to express ourselves as an artistic life form. We don't get to do that. We get told what to do. We get told what success is, what the quality of our life is, and we get taught that the quality of our life will be measured by how much stuff we can accumulate. That's who we are. Well, it's not. None of it is. It's all irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. And we're also taught that there's also something that's threatening us. That's very important for government to be there. We have to have an external threat. We have to believe in ISIS, or China's coming, or Russia's coming, or someone's coming. And we've got to pick a side. And that's what it's all about. You've got to pick a side, pick a religion, pick a camp, pick a team, and fight with the other guys on the other team, so that we're always divided, and we're always fighting amongst each other, and we're never looking beyond the veil to see what causes this, to see why we can't just be born into this reality and live our lives as creative human beings, why we have to be enslaved to this system. That's what it's all about. That's how the farming occurs. The fact that people even believe this system is real, and the fact that if they're looking for a way out of this slavery system, they want someone to offer them another system, which is again someone else's idea of what their reality should be. People aren't prepared to put their own idea of what reality should be into practice. They're not prepared to stand on their own 2 feet and not take a backward step to people. They're just so willing to do what they're told and to comply with the wishes of people, and that's what creates the problem. When you've got that, and you're constantly running on the treadmill, and you're scared to question authority, when you start hearing rumours about these high-level scandals, as they call them, you just sort of have a little bit of a chat amongst your friends and think, oh yes, we knew they were up to something bad, and then you go on with it, and you go on with your day, and you watch TV, and you forget all about it. I mean, I don't know how people can do that. When this sort of stuff is uncovered, and you start to realise how all-pervasive it is, and that these are the people who are writing the rules that control your life, but people just aren't prepared to look at that. They just aren't prepared to think that way, because when they do think that way, they realise that the only real way out of this mess is for them to apply themselves to it and to stop complying with the system. That's the problem. They don't want that. They want someone else to lead them to safety. They want to join some movement and send them a couple of dollars every month, and then they get the newsletter that tells them the world has been saved, that everything's changed, and they can go on with things now. But they still want to keep this status quo the way it is. You know, a lot of people want freedom, but they don't know what freedom looks like. They know they don't like what they've got, but they don't know what they want. You know, and what they want really is self-responsibility, but most people just aren't prepared for it. See, that's how it works. I mean, that's really the prison. The prison is a prison of our mind. It's a prison that prevents us from ever wanting to be who and what we are, or even wanting to know who and what we are. We just don't want to go there. It's not worth the effort of trying to stand up and be a tall poppy. You don't want to get hit on the head, you know. It's just the way people are. People are afraid. They're cowed. They're just, their mind has been so convoluted and they've been fed so much misinformation about what they are and what reality is that they don't really, you know, it scares them. It scares them no end having to stand on their own 2 feet and be responsible for themselves. But that's really the only way out, you know. And if we could just stop complying with this system and say, no, we're going to do something else now and actually start helping each other, you'd find the whole system would break down because there are no enemies. The enemies are all constructed by the government. You know, this whole, even that, I mean, the whole war on terror, the fact that we even need government because we believe there's an external threat. There's your prison right there, because the governments are simply running a protection racket. It's just a protection and extortion racket. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been. That's why they put the fear of terrorism and the fear of Russia and the fear of ISIS or Islam or whatever it is this month. They put that into people all the time because they need people to be afraid, because otherwise the people do not need their government. That's the prison right there.
What you've done is, I was waiting for that word to crop up, which was fear. That is the one word that sums up the entire prison. Because without fear, people will stand up. But because that fear is instilled in them from what is quite likely the beginning of their lives, all the way from your first school that you go to as a very small infant, you are taught not to do things in certain ways, but to be controlled and conformed into what society believes it wants you to be. So you are being moulded into what is socially acceptable. But as you've mentioned in other videos, what is socially acceptable? How is it somebody's right to tell you how to live your life? Why do you have to live in that social acceptability, which is nothing more than a controlled paradigm? So people unfortunately get stuck from an early age of being indebted into a system. As soon as they take out, be it a small car loan or their first mortgage on a property, there is no way for them to then revert back out of that system in their mindset, because of the hamster wheel that they find themselves placed into, with the constant pressure of having to pay that mortgage, which obviously with the increasing fiat currency system is growing exponentially, which is then making it harder and harder for the newer generations not only to get into that property situation, but to keep up with the repayment of debt and the ever-increasing cost of life. So there's 2 schools of thought. You can either be stuck into that system like your parents were before you, because a lot of parents will be saying to their children, you need to get onto the property ladder, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. But as you've already highlighted, they are part of the already created social system. So you're going to have to break free out of that system in order to live your life in a different paradigm and educate yourself on what is actually reality in life. That's my perception. Too many people are stuck inside of the hamster wheel, and if you fall and fail to make payments, that's it. Your supposed wealth is removed and taken back from the banks, which is nothing more than fake created currency in the first place. So what people need to actually understand and realise is what's important in life. And what is important in life, in my perception, is time. And all you ever do is convert your time into chasing this paper paradigm. So people need to reflect and change their brain mechanism into what's important in life, being time. So what's your take?
Essentially, that's what they're harvesting from you, is your time. They're harvesting your life from you by making you walk between the lines and by making you work and collect all this stuff and pay for your house and pay all this stuff off. And you try to buy a house now, it's impossible. You'll be paying it off for the rest of your life. And if you don't have a perfect job that's going to last the rest of your life and you're always going to be making these payments, well, you're going to lose it. And then you're going to be still owe the money for it. So you're going to be in debt. Even student loans and stuff that they give people now. I mean, education should be free, for God's sake. Of course it should. All education should be free, but it should be real education. You know, people shouldn't have to pay for knowledge. That's absurd, you know. But it's all about putting people in debt, and that's how they squeeze society. That's how they keep you on the treadmill. That's how they keep you enslaved. Because money just provides scarcity. You know, that's all it's about. It's about providing scarcity in this world of abundance. You know, because you're separated from everything that you should have and could have because you need to collect paper to have it. You know, it's a complete scam, the whole thing. So, yeah, and you can't buy houses now. I mean, people couldn't, I don't know how anyone could afford to buy a house now. They'd be paying it off for the rest of their life and they never own it anyway. So what's the point in doing that, you know? And even if we were going to have, you know, normal places where we spend our lives in one particular place, well, it should be free. Everyone should have the right to somewhere to live simply by being born in that country. I mean, there's far better ways of doing things than what we are. But it's the way they've escalated it and the way they've raised the cost of living. This is all about depopulation as well. This is how you discard the lower levels of society. You get people running faster and faster on the treadmill until they start falling off. And then you create this whole stigma about the homeless. Oh, we don't want homeless people around here. You know, these people should be... What a British Prime Minister or one of the British ministers said that homeless people should be grabbed by the scruff of the neck and exterminated, is one of the British Prime Ministers or British ministers said that recently. So this is their view of it. They try to put this into the minds of the people so people see the homeless person as a threat. Oh, you know, look at him, he's dirty and unshaven, he may steal from me. They don't realise it's coming to them as well. It's gradually moving its way up the food chain. And eventually it's going to be just the rich and the elite and the slaves beneath them. And, of course, the military and police in between that, which will control the slaves. That's the big problem, is the military and the police, the ones who follow all the orders and do what these psychopaths tell them. That's something that we need to deal with. And the only really way to deal with that is for people to be peaceful about their rebellion against this system, make it simple non-compliance, because that way you're going to find lots of these mid-ranking officers and stuff all start breaking ranks and start standing with the people. It's when it gets violent that it's going to turn ugly. Of course, there may be situations where that happens, but we've really got to try to not let that happen, because that's really no way to escape the slavery system. Violence works right into their hands. What is needed is for people to really wake up to themselves and be prepared to stand in their power and be prepared to help people around and realise it's not about buying houses, it's not about buying all this stuff. You know, the cost of living now is absolutely ridiculous and we're all in so much debt. Who do we owe the debt to? We owe it to the bankers who lend us the money. So let's look at that. Let's look at how this system is really run. You know, the financial system, the money system, I mean, people have written whole books on this. It's been exposed for years and years how corrupt this financial system is. And you think, well, people will be interested in this. People will listen to this because it affects their hip pocket. That's all people care about is money. So this is a good approach. But as soon as you start talking numbers to a lot of people, they just glaze over. They know it's corrupt, but as soon as you try to explain it to them, they just glaze over. It's again, it must be magic or something, you know, something to do with the words. I don't know, but people's eyes glaze over, and they're not prepared to look at it. They're not prepared to look deep, and they're not prepared to see what the answer is, because it means they'll have to apply themselves to implementing that answer. And they don't want that. They want someone else to come along and save them. So it's a huge problem that we've got with that, you know.
I agree. People will glaze over. People won't take the time to look into something unless something becomes personal to their circumstance. Then they will spend all the time they need to figure it out. So what I think is occurring, as many others do as well, is there is this change occurring. Obviously, the US elections being one, the Brexit situation being the other, and the whole situation with the financial complex of where it is at the moment, with trillions and trillions of debt upon other forms of debt. Now, there's huge amounts of, obviously, banking institutions that are having wobbly knees, as it were, that could potentially bring down a real impending crisis, which obviously would be way worse than what happened in 2008. So the question that I have regarding that is, when banking institutions like this year have been issuing new written law, being bail-ins, all across the Western world, and increasing ZIRP, zero interest rates, and negative interest rates across all central banking systems and mechanisms, which ironically enough are generally always run by Goldman Sachs people. When a bail-in situation should occur, because why would they be initiating this new law if they weren't thinking about introducing it and wiping out this middle class sector that you're also referring to, creating the two-tier system of the high oligarch type people running all the corporations and the poor people, the peasants, that struggle living life on a day-to-day basis, just trying to find enough food. That's kind of the way things are going. So when a system will likely crash, which a lot of people are predicting might be in the 2018 period, anywhere up until that period, how will that affect when it hits the living people inside that middle class and it becomes real? It has to become a widespread media of affecting them in their daily lives.
Well, it's going. The whole idea is to wipe out the middle class. I mean, they've been working on this for a long time. It's how people are going to take it. It's their belief that this fiat currency is real. How they can just switch the value of money on and off. Say, it's worth something today, and now it isn't. Well, actually, it isn't worth anything anyway. It's just paper. What you need is precious metals or something, or silver. I mean, if you've got any money in the bank, you should really be investing it in metals, because eventually this system will collapse. But it's our belief in the power of money, and our belief that this stuff is real, our belief that this whole economic model is needed, and that it's about the economy, and the economy is actually important, that it's actually real, and that it is something. I mean, it's just an idea. It's just numbers on a screen. It doesn't mean anything. You can't eat it. You can't go out and bang it with your fist. I mean, it's just an idea again. But I don't know. It's going to be a weird thing. I mean, unless people wake up to how they're being played before that happens, then it could get very, very ugly when the system crashes. But again, when it does crash, it's done by design. It's all done by design. I mean, the big crash of 33 was by design. In 2008, it was by design. All of the economic depressions that they've had have all been by design. So it's people's belief in this system really that is the problem,
So each crash that occurs, do you think that is a little by little way of removing people's wealths out of the system and for greater controls and regulations to be implemented?
Oh, for sure. They do that, and they take control of different banks up the food chain. They gradually consolidate the power and more centralise the power. And of course, as you say, remove people's rights along the way. Do it gradually. You couldn't do it all at once and take out the whole society at once. It'd be an uproar. So you've got to do it little by little the way they've been doing it. It makes perfect sense for them to do it that way.
Yeah. So we can see, obviously, pockets around the globe have been affected, be it Greece, be it Venezuela. You can see them test running various nations to see, I think, how they react, and how not only they react, but how other social countries react. Because as we know, people don't really care unless it's in their own cities, in their own towns. So they just ignore it and disregard other people's extreme...
It helps desensitise people. If you do it little by little like this and crash one country at a time, do the dark skinned people first or whatever, Haiti or something like that. It desensitises people to it, and they get used to seeing the bottom of the food chain being thrown out. So people don't notice when they get thrown out because, hang on, I didn't perceive myself to be the bottom of the food chain, but now here I am broke on the street. Why won't someone help me? Well, why didn't you help people when they were in that position before, when you were in a position to help them? You didn't, because you were trained not to, so why would you think anyone above you is going to look at you anything differently? It creates this acceptance, and it desensitises people to the fact that it's happening all around them. And when it happens to their neighbours next door, suddenly they don't feel as close to their neighbours next door as what they did when they had money, and they could socialise together. John obviously messed up. Look at him, he's out on the street now, silly man. Of course you'll blame him. You won't blame the system, and it's all programming.
Yeah. So that's something I try to aim at via this channel, is to try and educate people about the financial implications, because from that you grab their consciousness, because obviously that's a very real impacting situation for them, and from that I hope to obviously expand and show them other areas, obviously, that people like yourself can educate and expand their consciousness about what actually is really important. going on around the world. Now, something I've noticed, you'll see across obviously the last year, you'll have places like the European zone, which is the whole cashless society situation, which is starting to occur via the banking systems. Now, obviously, they're trying to remove cash. So there's this big divide, obviously, currently from the West and the East, because a lot of the Eastern countries are very cash rich in how their day-to-day businesses work. A lot of people work cash in hand. And obviously in the European and Western worlds, everything is debit card related. So everything is inside of the banking system. So with the European Union cancelling and removing the €500 notes in denomination form, and what's currently happening in India as of a couple of days ago, they also have removed the two highest denomination bills, being the 1,000 and 500 rupee bill. And I also caught a clip of this could be happening in Australia as well, in the $100 bill and possibly the $50 bill. Have you seen anything on that?
No, I haven't, but I hope they don't do that. I mean, that would be shocking if they did that. But it makes sense that they would. I mean, I went to a supermarket in Holland when I was there earlier in the year, and that they didn't accept cash. And I just said to them, well, that's all I've got. And they said, well, we only accept cards. And it was an organic supermarket. So it was the alternate community. You go to the normal supermarket around the corner where everybody buys their normal GM food and stuff, you could use cash there. But in the organic alternate supermarket, they didn't accept cash. I went in there and bought a few things, and when I went to pay, they said, we only accept cards. And I said, well, I don't have a card. And I'm from Australia, and I've got cash. And they said, well, we don't accept cash. So I said, well, are you telling me you're refusing to accept payment for goods? And the lady said, no. And I said, well, okay, here's payment. And she said, okay, we can't take that. And I said, well, so you are refusing to accept payment for goods. And she said, you know what, you can just take that stuff and leave the store and we'll cover the cost.
Right.
And I said, really? And she said, yes, you can do that. So I did. I took my milk and bread or whatever it was that I bought, and I left the store, which I thought was pretty cool. But, yeah, I can see how they're leaning towards that, you know.
Yeah, so following on from that, obviously it's a design to remove the ability of paying in cash, holding cash, pushing obviously people's perceived wealth into only one avenue and channel, which is obviously directly into the bank, which then leads into what we discussed earlier, which is the bail-in. So you can kind of see how it's all orchestrated and slowly but surely being pushed upon the people for some form of reset collapse occurring, which is really why I try to show people this is happening so people can get prepared, because you can imagine the extreme discomfort people are going to feel and the extreme fear that people are going to be going through when such an event should happen. And something I also view is, once upon a time, humanity used to be the hunter-gatherer. We used to go out, we used to prepare, we used to harvest, we used to store for the winter months. And that's something which has totally been destroyed out of society. We live on I'll go shopping once a week. So they've lost the ability to effectively protect themselves and provide for themselves and their family if something like their debit cards cease to work.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've lost all of our life skills. That's something that they've done very deliberately through the education system, and just the way they've created the nanny state around us. I mean, people don't know how to, not only do they not know about hunting and gathering, most people don't even know how to cook or plant a garden. Most people don't even know how to plant seeds and grow their own vegetables. It's shocking to think that they don't know to put a seed in the ground and cover it with dirt and put water on it. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple thing, growing your own food, you know, but they just don't understand. No, they don't know how to cook. They don't know how to, a lot of people don't even know how to write. They use typewriters. So they've digitized everything, and once they digitize your money and they put it all on a microchip in your arm, then they've got you. They've got you by the short and curlies. They can turn that off anytime they want. Now, if we ever allow them to digitize currency, and we still believe we have to use currency, then that will be the final lockdown of the slavery system. They've got you at that point. because they can switch that off. If you do anything that they don't like, they can switch off your access to anything which will, serve you. You won't be able to. Now, once you've got digital keys on your house and a digital key on your car, and you've got digital cash and digital passports and all this sort of stuff, they turn you off, and suddenly you can't open your house, you can't access any funds, you can't buy any food, you can't travel anywhere, you can't put petrol in your car, you can't start your car, all sorts of stuff. So it's a really, really shocking path that they're leading us down. And if people can't see the potential for corruption and the potential for misuse of this type of technology, and if they're going to allow governments with the track record that our modern governments have to start using this technology and implementing these sorts of systems upon the people, then they've got rocks in their heads. They really have. They deserve the enslavement that they're getting. Now, here in Australia, we've got a Prime Minister who is currently providing air support for Al-Qaeda and ISIS terrorists in Syria, following the US's covert invasion of that country, is destroying our water table and enslaving this country to all sorts of ridiculous laws and legislation. Rampant police state being built, and this guy wants to take away your access to currency, wants to digitize everything. Why would you give this man control of anything? You wouldn't give this man control of a bread shop. I mean, he's a criminal. He shouldn't be in power. He's an ex-investment banker, and he's bombing children in Syria. He's giving air support to terrorists. I mean, this whole fake war on terror that all these governments are supporting, the whole state of the world today, when you look at the state of the world today, why on earth would anyone even consider allowing this digital control grid to be rolled out and allowing this government to take control of their money and their wealth? It's absolutely absurd. So that's something people need to think about. Who's controlling all this? No matter how much you think this technology may be convenient, look who's running it. Look who's running it. It's being run by the people who are running this war on terror and running this whole slavery system. This group, these dark pedophiles who support this dark agenda that exists behind the scenes. This is who's doing it. These are the people that want to control you and control your currency, and you think that they're not going to misuse this? You've got rocks in your head.
So referring to this Al-Qaeda and ISIS and ISIL, the forever changing name, which is effectively just one face, is sweeping across the Middle East. And you'll obviously see the connection from the Western powers, obviously being the UK, the European Union, the States, and obviously connections with Australia, funding and supporting these terrorism entities for effectively creating new puppet dictatorships in countries that they currently don't control. So how is it that people are being shown this, they're being told this, yet they ignore this? How do you break into somebody's psyche that just doesn't want to listen? How can we actually try to help people wake up to stop what it is that's actually happening?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I've been trying to do that for 9 years. I mean, it's so obvious, but people just shut out. They just don't look at it. They don't want to look at the shadow. They don't believe that their government could be involved in something so nefarious. They just believe what the newspaper tells them. The mainstream media, this is really the problem. The mainstream media is one of the biggest problems that we face, because the mainstream media doesn't report real news. It just reports government-controlled propaganda, and it sells the government lies to people. And that's the problem. Until we can get some control of the media, or get the media to act in an honest way again, the way they perhaps did once. I don't know whether that was ever true, but perhaps they had more, integrity than they do now. I'm sure they did at one stage. But now they don't. There's no integrity from the media. So that's the problem, is that people just don't have the real story. People don't know what's going on. But it is. I mean, there's terrible, terrible damage being done to all these countries in the Middle East. It's all supported by our governments. And when I say our government is providing air support for ISIS and al-Nusra Front and al-Qaeda terrorists, it's because what's going on in Syria is not about, it's not a popular uprising. It's not a civil war. It's a covert invasion aimed at regime change, because the West doesn't want Assad in there, because Assad will not capitulate to what the West wants him to do. So they want him out. They just want the country destabilised, and they just go and fund a terrorist army and do it. Same as they did with Iraq, same as they did with Libya, same as they're now doing with Syria. It's all the same thing. And our government is bombing the Syrian army, who is actually fighting the terrorists. So if we're involved in a war on terror and we're apparently fighting terrorists, Why are we funding them and giving them air support in Syria simply because the US doesn't particularly like President Assad? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's, you know, you can't be fighting terrorism on one hand and funding terrorism on the other hand. It doesn't make any sense. And all the weapons and stuff that they're funneling into Syria, it's all ending up in Iraq and all over the place anyway. All of these terrorists that are rampaging across the Middle East have all got Iraqi, Saudi Arabian and US weapons. You know, US weapons, Israeli weapons, Saudi Arabian weapons, some English gas, British gas. So, you know, it's all being funded by the West. The West has created all this instability in there, and all of these little pet terrorist groups that they've got are simply mercenary armies that are carrying out Western wishes in these covert invasions of these sovereign nations. You know, we're supporting that. And while they're doing that, while our government is supporting that and funding that and sending aircraft in there to help these terrorist forces, they're telling us that they're fighting terrorism. They're not. They're creating terrorism. The war on terror is a war of terror. And it's destroyed 3 countries at least so far, and they're working on more, 4 if you want to take Yemen into it. I mean, it's all the same thing, really. It's all the same excuse: more depopulation, more escalation of tension. You know, that's what's so good about Hillary Clinton not being voted in, even though Donald Trump is like Bozo the Clown, and God knows what he's going to end up being. It may be better, it may be worse. You know, we just got to wait and see. But anything's got to be better than Hillary Clinton. Anything's got to be better than more of the same. And at least it is a call for change from the people of the United States. You know, even if that change is bad, they want to change from what we've got. So that's a good sign to begin with anyway. And we've seen it in England with Brexit, and we've seen it in Australia with the massive swing in the last election they had here. We've seen it in Iceland. We've seen the people of the world basically saying we've had enough. So hopefully we're going to stand up a little bit from this point. I think when the Trump presidency turns out to be not what people expected it to be, and when they see that they've been played again, perhaps people will stand up. Maybe that's what it will take, but I hope they do it soon, brother. I really do.
Yeah, so a video that I've recently just put together has been based upon what I believe could be a global psyop, effectively, and I'll sum it up. Because we've got the situation where all these alternative events seem to be occurring. Now, a lot of people are coming out saying this could be factions fighting within the higher system, but I'm also linking together how this whole thing could be more of a dynasty setup between all the Lincoln families that seem to control what it is that is this world. And something that I understand is, well, when high level people control a system and hold all the keys to all the gates, how is it physically possible for them to lose control? And something I'm now trying to link together is how this Trump might be connected or linked to the establishment, because I don't see how it's possible to even get into the situation where you can be elected, which I always class as being selected, without some sort of backing. And could this all be a massive psyop on the people believing that they are voting for change when they effectively have no option? Because obviously if voting had any difference in any system, it obviously would have been made illegal. So with that in mind, and Donald Trump's personal funding, that obviously he's a billionaire and able to fund himself, there is no paper tie linking him to any of the organisations or establishments that currently run the system, because he's a self-funded made man. But what he might be being promised is a seat at the table inside of the inner circle, and that is one deep agenda where people believe they're going to be getting change, to then be rudely awakened in 2 months' time when he takes office and fails to do anything on the list. And people have just lost 2 months worth of time, and the whole system could come crashing down. So what do you take? What's your take on that?
It could well be. It could well be. I mean, the next 2 months are absolutely crucial, and the next 2 months will reveal all. And if not in the next 2 months, then it will be revealed very, very quickly as soon as Trump takes office. You know, you've just got to wonder. I mean, he is in a position to make change. Whether he will is another question. But like you say, how did he get to that chair to begin with? Sure, he's self-funded, And I can understand that the people of the United States have simply had enough, and I can see how he could get in. Yeah, but when you look at the voting machines, you look at the whole lot, I mean, there's so much in this election. I mean, we heard about how voting machines were flipping and stuff, but I think if Hillary had actually been put in, you know, after the FBI announcement that he cleared her of any wrongdoing with the emails, and Obama's announcement that she deserved a pardon and all this sort of stuff, if she'd suddenly been elected, there could have been civil war that the United States was simply unprepared for. You know, it may well have erupted into that. Even now we're seeing it from the other side, but a lot of these protests are staged. But you just don't know. I mean, Trump's a total wild card. He's in a position where he could actually be what he says he is. I mean, it's doubtful, but he could be. You've got to really look at it and try to assess it and realise that ultimately it's not about what he does anyway. It's about what we do. You know, you've got to keep a close eye on him, and if he does renege on these promises and does renege on these deals, then the people need to stand up. Perhaps this will provide the opportunity for them to do that. Perhaps it will provide the opportunity for the world to see the farce that this whole system actually is, and provide the motivation for them to actually stand up for themselves once and for all, because that's what they need to do. You know, there is no leader. I mean, it doesn't really matter what Trump does. Trump's just, the United States deserves Trump. He's just something out of left field that is anything but the currently accepted status quo, and shows that people want anything but the currently accepted status quo. But like you say, it could well be simply throwing the research community or the alternate community a bone and seeing if they take it, and he could have turned out to be worse than all the others combined. We just don't know at this point. You know, we've got to wait and see, I guess. But there's so many people out there speculating at the moment. You know, whatever it is, the people need to be united in one cause and in one movement. And I think it's useless to speculate that he may be this and he may be that, because we don't know. He has no political history at all. And unless you've been one who's actually watched his business dealings and kept tabs on Trump's life, then we don't really know much about this guy. So anything's possible. I'm not going to condemn him until I witness something worthy of condemning. You know, I've seen him do a few things that I've been a little bit sus on in the last week or so, since he got shown to be the president, or became the president-elect. So it's not looking good. I mean, it's not looking good in the first few days. But then again, if I was someone who was trying to infiltrate into the system, I'd probably be making a lot of promises and capitulating to Israel and stuff along the way as well, because that's the only way you're going to get office. So, you know, all politicians break election promises. Which promises is he going to break? Is he going to break the promise to investigate 9/11, or is he going to break the promise to keep funding Israel? Which way is it going to go? We won't know until he joins, until he gets power, until he takes the big chair. So I think it's dangerous to speculate too much on this sort of stuff. I mean, unless you're someone with the inside dirt on Trump. But, you know, I find a lot of people become an authority on people. All of a sudden, I'm an authority on Donald Trump, I'm an authority on Hillary Clinton or whatever. And people, they're not. They're just not. I mean, this could go any way. And I'm hoping it provides at least some time for humankind to regroup, at least something that's going to cause mankind to wake up to themselves. I don't think Trump's the saviour. I don't think he's going to lead anything to safety. I think his presidency is going to be a disaster. But even if that happens, that's an opportunity for the people to stand up. I mean, all of it is an opportunity for the people to stand up. Maybe this will show people they don't need leaders, that they can do it themselves. They've just got to grow a little backbone. So, you know, anything could come from this, but it could be played either way. It could be a big psyop, could be all planned, could be theatre. Yeah, so much of it is. So much of what goes on in the world is simply theatre for the masses. All the world is a stage. So let's just see what happens.
So that is really something I'm just trying to be devil's advocate and play the other side, just to keep people, you know, aware that this may not be quite as it seems, and don't be led blindly into what it is that we're being told. So it's just to keep a balanced view and grounded to what is happening around this world. And as you say, when people want help or people want things to change, they look to a leader. But the situation is, make sure your leader is actually a genuine leader, and you won't know that, as you say, until a couple of months have passed. Now, something else I see happening is obviously the situation with the riots occurring through America, and what we see also happening with all this bombing happening through the Middle East and this Syria and Libya and everything that goes on in the in the news, we see this constant flood of asylum seekers moving west, obviously for safer ground. Now, obviously, we can see that a lot of this can be controlled. Okay, guys, it seems that we've dropped out. So I'll just try and reconnect to carry on that mode.
Hey, brother.
Hello, Max. Yeah, I thought we were doing quite well. So, shall I just continue straight on?
Yeah, just continue straight on. We'll do a few more minutes, eh?
Okay. So, I'll start again from the situation of what could be this George Soros world agenda by controlling various events globally. He is pushing a lot of migrants we see into the Western world. Now, do you see that as being some sort of operation to cause not only tensions but possible connections to this terrorism fear that they seem to like to play?
Oh, for sure, absolutely. That's what it's all about, is fear mainly. I mean, there is an agenda to genocide the people of Europe via mass migration. This is the Kalergi plan, penned by Jews in 1928, where they actually talk about that, the planned genocide of the peoples of Europe via mass migration. That's what's happening with the big influx of refugees into Europe. But also a lot of it is to promote the fear agenda. You've got to believe there's a terrorist around every corner, because otherwise you don't need the government. You don't need police everywhere. You don't need surveillance cameras everywhere. You don't need all the control grid to be locked down around you the way it is. If you're not in fear of racial tension or in fear of Islamic extremists or whatever it is they can put next door to you, then you don't need them there. So that's what it's all about, of course. That's what they play the fear card with everything. Even when people get loans and buy houses, it plays the fear card. They're always running on the treadmill in fear that they can't pay the loans, in fear they won't make the payments. And it's the same sort of thing, in fear of the people next door, in fear of this, in fear of that. In fear of going out at night, there could be a rapist, in fear of eating that food, in fear of this, whatever. They like fear. It's what really keeps the matrix in place.
Okay. So we'll leave it there on the matrix in place. And hopefully you'll be kind enough to join us again and we can pick up with what this matrix is all about. So I'd like to thank Max İgan for coming on the show, and he again is thecrowhouse.com. That's the website where you can find all the information regarding his latest videos and reports that he puts out.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you for asking me on. Happy to come on again anytime.
Okay, thanks a lot, Max. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, brother. Bye-bye.